Hello everyone, my name is Michael Flodine, and today I will be doing a presentation on French wine. I thought it would be fun to do because I've taken a couple of French classes at school before, but I've never really studied French wine. So I thought it would be something new and interesting, and it was, so I really liked it, so I hope it is for you as well. As we can see, my subheading is popular from 6th century BC to modern day 21st century. Alright, well let's get into it. So the country of France. This is a very old nation that's been around since the Middle Ages, so hundreds of years, and it is much older than the United States of America. It is currently a prominent country in Europe in both agriculture and industrial. It is an extremely popular tourist destination. It has things such as the Eiffel Tower, which is known worldwide, the Louvre Museum, which has many pieces of art, such as the Mona Lisa, and then countless castles and buildings that are very popular among tourists, and a variety of things such as that. Also, it is known for many gourmet foods and drinks, such as wine, which we will get to, cheese, also things like croissants and eclairs, and then snails as well, one of their more, I suppose you could say, exotic, escargot, which is snails with lots of butter and garlic, which I will never try. Now on the right hand side we can see a couple pictures. On the top right we have the French flag, very simple, three vertical stripes of blue, white, and red next to each other. And then on the bottom right we have a map of France showing the different regions, and this is important, which we will get to later, as many regions, and you can kind of think of them as the United States, how we have states. That's almost a way you can think of it. So the history of wine in France. It was first grown in France in the 6th century BC. Now, this was not actually the country of France because France was not a country, so it was grown by the Roman Empire in the area that is now France. Then later it was grown by monks in the Middle Ages when France was becoming a country. The monks grew it because they needed a source of income to fund their churches at the time, and also the wine was used in communion because that is a very important of communion, the blood of Christ. So it was used for two purposes there that were very important, and it worked out quite well for them. Then later, the nobility in France joined in their vineyards as well because they wanted their own private wines and such, so they created their own vineyards. During the French Revolution, Napoleon confiscated all of the vineyards, so now no one was really making any wine, and the wine production went to a lull, a standstill. And then later, as time went on, then the disease, the World War I, and the Great Depression in France in the 19th and 20th century became a problem, and also wine production stopped there as well. However, it rebounded after World War II, and ever since then, the wine production has been going up. Wine in France. France is the largest producer of wine by volume in the entire world. It has a large variety of wines, such as Merlot, Pinot Noir, Champagne, so all the main ones. Wine is grown in a specific region. So reds from Pinot Noir may be grown in Burgundy, while in Bordeaux you may have Merlot. Now actually, Bordeaux is considered world's most popular wine region. Now, going back real quick, I'm going to move back to another slide, and this was the one that showed some of the regions of France. Now, as you can see on the bottom right, Bordeaux is actually on the bottom left of France, and you can see all these different regions, and they all have their different wines. So I'll get more into that later, because there are strict controls on the production of wine. And then on the left, we can just see a bottle of wine by a vineyard. Wine and food. So some of the main things you want to look for when you're pairing wine and food is the acid, body, aroma, and flavor. So all of those are main things you want to take into account when you're pairing it. So the general rule is to pair the intensity of food with the intensity of wine. So you may have red wine with meat, and then white wine with fish and poultry. So an example would be Chardonnay and chicken, and then red Bordeaux and lamb. Now, you also, when moving on to cheeses, which is very popular as well, a cheese, fruit, wine board, as we can see on the right, you pair wine and cheese from the same place when in doubt. So if you're not sure, you can pair, Burgundy wine with Burgundy cheese. If you don't have any idea, that's generally the safe play. However, if you're going to do it properly, I suppose you could say, you would have sparkling wine with soft, creamy cheeses, and then a bold red wine with aged cheeses. And as you can see, that is also follows the general rule of pairing the intensity of food with the intensity of wine. Aged cheeses are very heavy and hard on the taste buds, and then bold red wine would also be the same. However, the main thing to keep in mind is really you should enjoy whichever wine combination you want, because honestly, at the end of the day, it's your food and your drink, and whichever one you want is the correct one. So now we're moving on to something that I'm not really sure how to pronounce, so I'll try my best. The appellation d'origine contrôlée. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, so we'll call it the AOC because that's very popular of how people say it as well. So this is a mandatory standard in France. So French wines must meet these requirements because there are a lot of different vineyards around the world that produce different wines, but France holds their wines to a very high standard. And this is actually a classification by the government that was made in the 1930s, and this is to ensure the quality of wine and to make sure that all French wines meet a certain standard, and that French wines do not fall below the standard, and then you can say, oh, well, France has this wine that's good, but it's also bad in this wine. So they really want to ensure the quality and make sure that wine is very, very good in their country. So what does it mean? Well, it has to be grown in a specific region, and here I have the same picture I showed earlier, such as the ones that have all the different regions. You can see Montpellier on the bottom right, Lyon kind of in the middle right, and Dijon above that. So all of these different regions have specific grapes inside of them, and they grow specific wines. So you may have one wine grown in one region, but it's not grown in any of the other regions. And also it would be a specific grape. Now, it's generally a blend of grapes inside that region instead of just one grape. So for example, California can grow wine anywhere in the state that they want. They also would typically use one grape, but on the different hand, in France, you're growing it in one region, and you're also using a blend of grapes, but those blended grapes have to be all from that same region. And also, another thing that just gives an example of how strict and how high these rules are is that Burgundy has 400 different types of soil, and it has to be grown with the right type of soil. So you may have a wine that is made in Burgundy region, and it may be made with 3 specific grapes, and then it may be made on one out of the 400 types of soil, and that is a wine. So as you can see, this AOC rules are very strict and really do ensure the quality of wine. So lastly, I just want to cover a few additional topics. We already covered the main things I wanted to talk about, but here are some extra things I thought would be fun to talk about. So one of the things you want to do is you want to pick the right wine for the occasion. So a really popular wine for celebrations is, as I'm sure we all know, is champagne. But another thing I want to talk about is a lot of people will order by the bottle or the glass. And there's different occasions on which you want to do that. So if you're in a restaurant, you may choose to order by the bottle, which makes a lot of sense, because if you're having a steak, you may want only red wine. You may not want to have white wine, so you could just order a bottle of red wine. However, if you're eating fruit, cheese, and also any crackers or anything on a specific occasion, you may wish to have multiple glasses of wine, such as maybe a red wine and a white wine, maybe a sparkling wine as well, because you're going to be pairing different cheeses with the wines, just like we talked about earlier. So instead of ordering a bottle of wine, you may want to have different glasses of wine. Another thing I want to talk about is how wine cellars, these can be very old and very large. Now normally when people think of wine cellar, oftentimes they'll just think of a mansion with a wine cellar down below. But some of them, such as the Chateau de Marseille in Marseille, France, that was made in the 14th to 16th century by monks. Remember, we talked about monks earlier. It actually holds about 700,000 bottles and 2,000 caskets. So on the right-hand side, you have a picture of it, and you can just see all the caskets, and they're all filled with wine. It is absolutely incredible. So another thing now is wine as an investment. So something you generally don't think of, but a lot of people who have a lot of money will invest in wine. So it'll look on things like age, how old it is, scarcity, how rare it is, the pedigree, such as where it's grown, which is a big thing in France, remember, etc. And also, just as an example of how expensive this can get, there's a 12-bottle case of Domaine de la Romanée Conti, I believe I say it, and that was made in 1988. That sold for $305,000 in 2018. So that is an absurd amount of money for that amount of wine. So it's pretty cool. You can make a lot of money doing that. And here we go. This is the last slide. It is just the works cited. I had a lot of sources I looked through, a lot of cool stuff on the internet to find. So there are all the links for it, APA style. Anyway, thank you for listening to my presentation. It was really fun to make. I learned a lot about French wine in this, and I hope you did as well. Well, thank you, and have a great day.